Let's go to Japan now, where a court in Tokyo has ordered the Unification Church in the country to be dissolved. The South Korean-based church came under scrutiny after the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who reportedly had links to the organization. His alleged killer blamed the church for bankrupting his family by accepting large donations from his mother. Let's get the latest on this story with Jeffrey Hall, Special Lecturer in Japanese Studies at Kanda University of International Studies. Jeffrey, good to have you with us in the program again. Now, firstly, what does this court ruling in Tokyo effectively mean for the Unification Church?
Well, it's great to be back. This court ruling basically means that the church will lose its tax-exempt status as a religious corporation. This is not necessarily destroying the religion, as some people might think from the headlines. It's not dissolving the people who make up the religion. It's just going to make it harder for them to practice their faith and gather money because the government will be paying closer attention to their assets, taxing them much more, and preventing the kind of large donations that got them in trouble in the first place.
Yeah, so what is it exactly about the church's activities and practices that have got the attention of investigators, especially after Shinzo Abe's assassinations and ultimately today's court decision?
Well, as you said, the mother of the assassin who killed former Prime Minister Abe donated her family's fortune to the church, and there were many cases like this when the government started investigating after Abe's assassination. They looked into the practices of the church and they found cases amounting to some 130 million US dollars where donations had been made in these gratuitous ways through methods that were a bit shady. And so it was ruled that because the church was detrimental to the public good or public morals, that it didn't have the qualifications to remain as a religion. And this has only been done 2 other times in the past. Those were for cases that involved criminal activity, such as the Aum Shinrikyo terrorist attack in the 1990s. They were dissolved. But in this case, this is a dissolution that's based purely on civil cases in which victims said that they were victimized and forced to or coerced into donating far too much money and not being able to get it back from the church.
So, Jeffrey, what sort of precedent does this set, the use of this civil code in terms of approaching religious organizations? Would this set a precedent for the future and perhaps see investigations for other organizations that are similar to the Uniting Church?
It would set a precedent, and that's why the church is trying to appeal this to the Supreme Court. They do not want this precedent to be set, especially for themselves. And it could have repercussions to other religious groups in Japan. There are other smaller religious groups that do, like any religion, rely on donations from their adherents to survive. And it really maybe opens a door to the possibility of those religions being investigated in the future. However, in this case, they really got the attention because of this assassination of former Prime Minister Abe and the media attention to the family of the assassin and other families that have been victimized in similar ways. Usually, religion is a rather private matter in Japan, and it's not really covered that much by the media, and people tend to not pay that much attention to it.
Jeffrey, can you tell us how influential is the Uniting Church in Japan? Because there was an internal survey by the ruling LDP, and that found that half of its lawmakers had links to it.
It's hard to measure exactly what that linkage means in terms of influence, but certainly more than half of the party was involved in some way, whether it be attending church events or relying on volunteers from the church or appearing in church-sponsored publications. So the church seemed to have some influence in pushing its conservative viewpoints on things like gender, on same-sex marriage, and on constitutional revision. And it was a very, very conservative anti-communist organization, so it had a lot of overlap with Japan's ruling conservatives for many decades. And even to this day, the cabinet of the ruling party has cabinet ministers who had ties to the church in the past. So it hasn't really cleaned house or punished the politicians who had ties to the church. They've said that they're no longer associating with them, but there is a gray area where members of the church as individuals might be helping out these politicians and saying they're not doing it as members of the church anymore.
And this church doesn't just operate within South Korea and Japan's borders. How far and how high up has the Unification Church spread its wings beyond those shores?
Beyond Japan, the biggest place where the church has expanded is the United States. It has, since the time of the 1960s and 70s, been active in investing and in influencing politicians there. It owns the Washington Times, a newspaper in the United States, and its events that it holds through affiliated organizations, the UPF, they call it, holds events each year in South Korea where they invite foreign politicians to give speeches, and they pay handsomely. It's said that Donald Trump received more than $2 million to speak at some of their events during the time he wasn't president. Other politicians from around the world who are conservative appear at these events. And when they appear at these events, they lend credibility to the church and thus help the church to raise money from people and convince the people's families or them that we're not a shady organization. It's okay to give lots of money to us. Look, Donald Trump is speaking on our behalf, and so on. And Prime Minister Abe was one of the politicians who also spoke at one of those events, which put the target on him in the eyes of this assassin.
And finally, Jeffrey, do you think today's court decision might have any impact on the future trial of Tetsuya Yamagami, the man who allegedly murdered Shinzo Abe?
Well, some people say that today's decision is rewarding him or giving him what he wants. We're not really sure exactly what he wants. He hasn't been speaking to people since he was arrested. Certainly, he was angry at the church and what it did to his family. But in terms of his trial should be carried out separately. And he's very certain to be found guilty because the evidence is quite abundant. And there is talk that he may receive the death penalty, which is still legal in Japan and used for very serious offenses. So this trial still has yet to play out, and we'll have to see what happens.
Okay, Jeffrey Hall, always good to get your insights there from Japan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.